So with the rear TMD complete, it's time to turn my attention to this front TMD area of the layout. As you can see, track work's all down. Track work is all ballasted. It's also been weathered, and you can see that on one of my previous videos. In addition to that, we've got the hard standing in, which you can see in TMD part 1 video. We've also got this fueling point in at this end. Now I will put the camera up in a minute to give you a better view of this. I put this in when I put the ballast in because what I wanted to make sure is that it was set into the ballast, so the grime and everything went right up to the sides of it. We've got the cable trunking in and the relay boxes and the buffer stops with the lights, and you can see all of that in my video, which is all about weathering the track, so part 2 track detail video. So let's get started. Now the first thing I did was we put down the road surface, and you can see here this grey, this is my normal baseball colour. I just give it a coat of paint just to kind of tone it down and to seal it. And then for this road area, what I used was the Town and Scenics texture paint, and you get that from Squires. They're at most trade big exhibitions, and that's where you get that from. Painted that down. It's a very light grey, and I just hit it up with the airbrush when I had the airbrush out to work on the tracks to give it some darker grey colours. So what we've got is we've got the fueling point at this end, and we've got the 2 different areas where we're going to have sheds stood at this end. I'll just move the camera down. I'm sure it's going to go far enough down. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. Now over here, the station is over this side, nearest where my hand's waving at the moment. So over here where I've left this thin grey area, right the way down here, and back here, which you can't see unless I move the camera up, back here, this is going to be a pavement. We're going to have some parking spaces here, and the pavement will come round and eventually run off to where the station is. As you drive in here, we're going to have a security area just there, and that is a little kit that I got on eBay. I've snapped off one of the arms on this side, but I'm just going to glue that back on. I've still got it. So I have a little security gate here, all the way around the outside down by the main line. We're going to have some fencing. I'm sorry, I was telling you about the footpath. So the footpath I'm going to be using is this. It is from Scenic. It's a footpath kit. It's laser etched, just needs painting up and installed. So that's the footpath that's going to go in. As I say, round by the tracks, we are going to be using this scale model scenery chain link fencing. Now they've discontinued this kit, but just recently found some of the material that's in here and posted a few of these online. I'm not sure if he's still got them available or not. The reason I didn't use it in the last TMD video was because I didn't have any. I was waiting for this one to come, and I've only got the one of these, so I'm going to be using it on this side. So that's the fencing that's going track side, and then just to edge off around the back of the buildings and down this footpath, I'm going to be using again a scale model scenery product, and this is their I really struggle to say this word, Palisade security fencing. So that's going to be going along there. We are going to have the usual scale, I mean this is the scale model scenery show, but their products are just so good, you can't help but use them. We're going to have the scale model scenery tube safety fencing, and I've got both the small and the large, and that's already painted up because I painted that when I was working on the back TMD, so we'll be using that. We're going to be using some scale model scenery salt bins. We're going to be using some scale model scenery trackside signs. Then I've got some scale model scenery modern trackside walkway, which I've also airbrushed. And I didn't airbrush it, aerosol sprayed it yellow. And then we've got the usual things. So we've got a selection of Oxford die-cast vehicles, Network Rail, and I've also got a Royal Mail one there as well, which I thought would look pretty good just outside in the buildings. Then we have got some Graham Farish Scenecraft figures, my favourite cheap and nasty cars from China. I'm being ironic because they're not, they're awful, but they're pretty much all you can get in Engage. We've got some 3D printed bits and pieces there as well. The road striping pen from Woodland Scenics to put some road markings in. Now in my engine shed in the last TMD over at the back there, I didn't put any detail inside of it. Now I may come back eventually and do that, but I didn't put anything to start with. But in the sheds that are going over here, I have got a Train Tech welding light, 12-volt welding light, some Graham Farish lifting jacks, my same little signs from Right Track signs that I used in the rear TMD in the last video. I'll be using them again over here, and then I've got some 12-volt lights to go inside buildings. So let's talk buildings very quickly. So we've got the fueling point at the back here. That needs some fuel tanks, which are going to sit right there. Then we've got the washing plant, which is going to sit right there, right next to where the locals will be able to fuel. Then I have got 2 engine sheds, both identical, and these are the Graham Farish Syncraft engine sheds. I'm going to install some lights on the inside of these, and these are going to go just on these hard standing areas at the back. So as I said, I have 2 of them, one there and one going there. Trying to do this without being able to fully see. Then we've got this small crew mess room. Again, it's a Graham Farish Syncraft one. Now, I've painted this black on the inside. Now, I know what you're saying, that's white, Jeff, not black. To stop light leak, what I've done is I've given it 2 coats of black paint and then 2 coats of white paint. Now, if it was a building that you weren't going to be able to see in, so if you remember when I did the porta cabins over at the back TMD area, I just left that in black. Excuse me. Because you can't see in them, but because these are going to be at the front, I may at some point in the future decide to put an interior in them. Now, if this was double O gauge, I would definitely put interiors in, but because it's N gauge, you can't see that much. So to be honest with you, that's probably going to stay as it is, and that's going to be going down here. And then I've got this. Now, this is an old Hornby Scaledale office building. That's the ground floor, and then that's the first floor extension. And the idea is put that there, and that just sits in the top, and you have a building. Now, for me, it just looks too high. I'm not that keen on it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it side by side to give me a much longer building. Now, the only downside to this is the piece that sits on the top has a little lip, and that lip is what sits inside that piece of the roof to kind of hold them together. So I'm going to have to use a bit of grey board and get a little bit creative and create a base for this to stand on with the pavement going around it. That means I can set that into the grey board so that they sit flush. If I put them the roof flush, I'll show you. Can you see the piece down here that hangs down? So that's going to need to be disguised, but we'll do that, and that's going to go into this area here. Again, I've painted the inside of this with 2 coats of black and 2 coats of white to stop any light bleed, because I'm going to put a 12-volt light in. Now, this is a prime contender to have an interior in the future, because you can see into this. It's got a lot of windows. I have found a company in Germany that do some really good interiors in N-gauge, but it's quite expensive. So it's going to go on my future comeback project list, and that's going to go there. So without further ado, I've already been talking for 8 minutes. I'm going to crack on. I'm going to get the footpaths in. I'm going to get the hard standing in for this. I'm going to get the lights in the buildings. I'm going to paint up any fences that need painting, and then I'll come back to you. So I'll see you in just a second. So progress is going well. I've had to make a few changes, but I've started placing things out. I've got a few things glued down and painted. So this engine shed I've done nothing with just yet, but if I just move you down to the workbench, just down here, you can see what I've done with installing the lights on this. So apologies for the camera's wobbling, I'm holding it, but put 2 pieces of the 3-volt strip, 2 lights on each side, joined them together with some nice thin wire, and then brought in the 3-volt power supply here. I just use a bit of cable trunking just to keep that nice, not cable trunking, what's it called? Heat shrink, as cable trunking, just to keep it nice and tidy, and I'll just paint that up with some light grey so that it blends into the roof. But that's the other engine shed. Now back up to the layout, and the crew room's got a 12-volt light in, it's a little platform for it to sit there. The pavements have been installed. Let me just get the camera to focus a little better. I remember this was just this N Scenic, looked like this just white card, and I primed that with some grey spray primer. Then I dry brushed it with another shade of grey, a stone colour, and then I put some Humbrol wash over the top of it just to give it a bit of texture. I fixed this little security cabin. I've played around with where the lights are going to go, so we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. These buildings are now in place, and you can hopefully see this sitting flush with the work that I've done on a piece of cardboard just to make them sit side by side. Parking spaces have been painted in just using the Woodland Scenics marker pen. I really do like that pen. I think it works really well. I've started laying out where some of the walkways are going to go, and also where some of the safety railings is going to go. And I had a little bit of a drama with fences. So if you remember, originally I was going to use the scale model scenery. Where have I put it? Just grab it. I was going to use round the back, down here by the main line, I was going to use this chain link fencing, because this makes over 1 metre of it, but actually I need 1.2 metres of it, so that wasn't enough. So I've moved that. That's now going to come to the front. I'll show you where in a second. And then I was going to use this 2 metre palisade security fencing, which makes 58 centimetres. I was going to use this at the front. So what I've done is I've had a rummage around, and at some point I clearly bought 4 of these. I'm guessing at a model train show. I bought them for some reason and I've never used them, but anyway, I found 4 of them. Each one of them makes 34 centimeters, so miraculously I've got over 1.2 meters of that. So that's brilliant, because otherwise I'd have had to try ordering it, and I know the team Scale Model Scenery from their emails are really busy at the minute. So I've painted all this black. It's laid out at the back at the moment. It's going to be a nightmare to install because I'm going to have 1 million holes to drill, but that will get installed right the way along the back. And then the chain link security fencing I'm going to put right along here, just to frame off this area. Now it is very close to the edge of the baseboard, but other than me coming in for running shots, there shouldn't really be any reason for me to disturb it. And I've left, if I can get the camera to focus, we've got right along here, I've left a little strip which is just baseboard at the moment. It runs right along here as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint that brown and then put some static grass over the top of it. It's going to be a nightmare because it's tiny, but I'll manage it. And then put the fence posts in, just so it frames the area off. And if you imagine if I'm doing a running shot and the camera's down here, or better still at this side, and you're looking through the fence and the buildings and the railings, and the trains are going to go by up here, I think it's going to look really good. So that's the plan. I will crack on, do some more work, and then come back to you. So I got a little bit carried away yesterday. I was making really good progress, so I just kept cracking on and forgot to pick the camera up and record anything. So quick overview for you now as to where we're at. It's looking really good. I'm really pleased with it. Yeah, some days when you're modelling, I think you hit walls and nothing seems to work out, and then other days everything works the way you want it to and you just keep cracking on, and that's what I did yesterday. So all the buildings are in place, the greenery's in place. I'm just going to move the camera a little bit. This grass here is a little bit too green. I'm going to try and tone that down, but my layout is set in summer, so you know, I'm not too worried about that. The buildings, as I say, are all in. The lights are wired inside the buildings, but if I just zoom out a little bit, they all need connecting together. So that's the next job that I'm going to do. All these walkways are all glued in as well. I'm going to go over them with some dark grey wash just to tone them down a little bit as well. They're very yellow in your face. And then I need to get this fence in, this perimeter fence that's going to run all the way down here as well. So I'm going to get them done, and then I'll come back and give you an update. One of the things I did want to point out is the lights inside these engine sheds. I've actually painted them with some of this stuff. It's Tamiya colour, and it's a transparent, no it's not correct, sorry, it's called Clear Yellow X24. I just painted a little bit of that over the LEDs on the inside of the buildings because they were very bright and didn't want them to look exactly the same as the engine shed at the back. So I put a little bit of that on. Once it's all lit up you'll be able to see it, but it makes a huge difference. But anyway, I'm going to crack on and I'll be back in just a second. So that is the area pretty much done. So all the buildings are in, all the lights are wired in, all the spotlights are wired in. This fence, which was the fiddliest thing ever, is in and done, and I'm really happy with that. If you remember back into my update 2 on the TMD, when I put a fence in over at the back TMD over here, I used the Untitled models chain link fencing, and then this time I've used the scale model scenery one, and if I had to choose one over the other, the scale model scenery one's definitely better because the mesh is just much nicer to work with and to shape, and it's got a little bit of stretch in it, so really pleased with that. So let me show you around what I've done, and then I will put the lights on, and then I've got a question for you that I need your help to make a decision on, because I can't make a decision. So we have got, starting as we come out of the station here, we've got this piece of wasteland. I am all in place now. I've added a tree in there as well, and then put the boundary line in as a fence. And then as you move round, we've got the road coming in with a security area. I'm just going to bring the camera down and move it around. There we go. So we've got the security area there, and the footpath with the gates and the network rail signage on there as well. Network rail signage on the booth here as well. And then as you come into the yard, you've got the concrete fencing straight in front of you with some pallets of stuff there. We've got a building here for the crew to use. Then we've got the 2 engine sheds. We've got a spotlight here. And then making our way around, zoom out a little bit so you can see the car park, the perimeter fencing, got some overgrown grass and so on here as well. I've toned down some of the yellow on this safety barrier because it was just very in your face yellow. It was a bit too new looking for my liking. Got a couple of network rail vehicles as we come along. You've got the walkway, and I've toned all this down. I just used the dark grey Humbrol wash and went over the top of that to tone that down. Again, we've got more spotlights here, the washing plant, more spotlights, the fueling area. You've got the 2 buildings sat on a plinth. Bring you down a little bit just so you can get an angle from down there, looking right across the TMD. I'm really pleased with that. I think it looks really good. The fencing in right the way along the back, and then if I put my 12-volt power on first and come out, you'll see that this building now, if the camera focuses, is all lit up. It's got no interior. Keeping in mind it's N-gauge, I will maybe try and put an interior in there as a future project. And then coming around to this little crew building as well, that's lit up with a 12-volt. All the buffer lights, they all work as they were in the last video. They were already installed. And then if I just come back a little bit so you can see the whole thing, as I plug in the 3-volt light, it should really come alive. Voila, really happy with that. So we've got the spotlights covering the whole length of the yard, and then inside the 2 engine sheds we've got the lights in there as well. Now what I did was I used those bright white strip lights that I showed you earlier in the video, and then I used that yellow Tamiya paint that I showed you at the end of the last clip, and that just tones down the lights a little bit inside the engine shed. I think it makes it a little bit more prototypical. It's not as garishly in your face. I put a little bit of detail in just inside the shed there, and I've also added some small signage over here as well. And then I've just put in here, this is my N-gauge Society snowplow, just kind of park that in there because it's summer and it's just at the back of that side and out the way. The other thing I've done is I have put in a I forget the name of the company, the welder lighting effect, which is in this shed, and that's one of the reasons as well why I've toned the white lights down a little bit, just so that the welding light shows off a little bit better. If I just grab my controller, now I've set this up to work on DCC, so that, because I don't want it on all the time when the rest of the lights are on. So basically all I do on my Gauge Master Prodigy Advance, let's go accessory, enter the address, number 1 to turn it on, and hopefully you can see that flickering now and the light on in there, and it goes through the process. It'll go red in a second and then it turns off, resets itself and starts again. So really happy with that. Now let me just put the camera down, and then I've got a quick question for you. So in my last video, which was the TMD Build Part 2, there was lots of really helpful comments, which is fantastic, really appreciate that, including one on how I can stop the light bleed in this building, so I'm going to tackle that as a future project. And the other thing that a couple of people picked up on was the location of these fuel tanks. Now, my layout is loosely, because I do run a little bit of everything that takes my fancy, but loosely based in the early 90s, and that was a time when fuel, I've done a little bit of research online, would have been delivered by road as well as rail. And the problem I've got is this little TMD at the back's kind of shoehorned in. It goes all the way down to where the pacer is parked down here. So the fueling point is at this end, and the maintenance shed is at this end, just because I've got a very thin strip there, the back of the main lines to work with. In my head, when I first built this, was fuel tanker drives into the TMD, fills the tanks, and then the fuel is piped from the tanks over to the fueling point. I can't fit tanks anywhere over this side because there just isn't room anywhere over here. It's just not wide enough. I've tried playing around and there's not enough space. So what I could do is I can either leave it as it is, modeller's rule number 1 and all of that, or what I could do is remove this yellow safety fence that's just here and move the servicing point up here, so that it sits at the side of the shed, which is also next to where the fuel pumps are. Now, I like both of those ideas, so I'm not sure which one of the two to go with. So let me know down in the comments below what you think is the best option. But I'm going to leave the video there for now. I'm going to leave you with a running shot. I'm going to get my class 37 in network rail, just testing the tracks in the new yard. And then, as always, I'll leave some photos in the end of the video as well. Thank you for your continued support. Thank you for your comments. As I say, they are really helpful. It does help me stop and question things and look into things a little bit more as well, which is fantastic. And I will be back soon for my next video. I'm going to be tackling N-gauge catenary before we move on and carry on work on the station. But thanks guys, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I look forward to bringing you another video soon. Thanks very much.